Alex stood in the lobby, the air tasting of chilled steel and expensive perfume. He clutched an ordinary manila envelope, but inside it held a supernova, a confirmation slip for a $95 million lottery win. He thought this would be the moment his wife Sarah would finally see him. Not as the steady, unambitious architect of community centers and libraries, but as the man who could give her the world she so desperately craved. He imagined her tears of joy, her arms around his neck, the shared breathless laughter of disbelief. He was wrong. Within the next hour, in the glass-walled cage of her corner office, he wouldn't see joy. He would see a stranger, and in her eyes, he would see himself reflected as something small, something to be ashamed of. What they all didn't know was that the real power wasn't the money in the bank. It was the quiet dignity they were about to try and fail to strip away. Have you ever had a moment where you thought you were about to share the best news of your life, only to walk into a situation you never expected? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love to see how far these stories travel. Stick with me, because this is the story of how a simple piece of paper didn't just change a man's bank account, it revealed the true foundation of everyone and everything he thought he knew. The lobby of Thorne and Sterling was designed to intimidate. It was a cathedral of wealth, with a vaulted ceiling so high it seemed to generate its own weather system. A slab of black marble, polished to a mirror finish, served as the reception desk. Behind it sat a young woman whose expression suggested she was guarding the gates to a much better world. A world Alex was clearly not dressed for. He wore his usual work attire, comfortable chinos, a blue Oxford shirt, and a well-worn tweed jacket with leather elbow patches. It was the uniform of a man who thought more about building integrity than brand identity. "Can I help you?" The receptionist's voice was a crisp, dismissive chime. Her eyes did a swift, brutal inventory of his outfit and landed on the scuffed toes of his leather shoes. The verdict was clear: guilty of insufficient net worth. "I'm here to see Sarah Jennings," Alex said, his voice calm and even. He offered a smile that wasn't returned. "I'm her husband, Alex." The name seemed to cause a flicker of cognitive dissonance in the woman's perfectly curated composure. She glanced down at a screen, her fingers tapping on the keyboard with practiced speed. "Sarah Jennings doesn't have an appointment scheduled." The implication hung in the air, "and therefore you shouldn't be here." "I know," Alex said, his smile remaining in place, a small act of defiance. "It's a surprise." He felt the envelope in his hand, the paper warm and slightly crinkled from his grip. The surprise was supposed to be a joyous explosion, a life-altering secret shared between two people who had built a life together. But here, in this sterile, judgmental space, it was already starting to feel like something else, like a weapon he hadn't yet learned how to wield. The receptionist sighed, a tiny, put-upon puff of air. One moment. She picked up her phone, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There's a gentleman here for Sarah Jennings. Says he's her husband." The pause was deliberate, freighted with meaning. Alex could almost hear the unspoken addendum. "He doesn't look the part." He watched the silent ballet of the lobby. Men in suits that cost more than his monthly mortgage payment strode past with an air of absolute ownership. Women in sharp heels clicked across the marble floor, their gazes fixed forward, oblivious to his presence. He felt a familiar pang, not of envy, but of otherness. This was Sarah's world now. For years, he had watched her assimilate into it, adopting its language, its values, its armor. She called his work quaint, and his refusal to chase lucrative corporate accounts a lack of killer instinct. He had always believed their different worlds were a source of balance. He was the anchor, she was the sail. But lately he'd felt more like a weight she was trying to cut loose. The elevator doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Sarah emerged. She was flanked by two men, both cast from the same mold as the others in the lobby. Sharp suits, expensive watches, and the easy, predatory confidence of men who had never been told no. The man on her right, older, with silver hair and a brutally handsome face, was Marcus Thorne. Alex recognized him from the photos on the company's website and the way Sarah's voice changed whenever she mentioned his name. A mixture of reverence and fear. Sarah saw him. For a split second, her professional mask slipped. He saw a flash of something he couldn't name. Was it panic? Annoyance? Then the mask was back, welded into place. She walked toward him, her steps measured, her smile tight and artificial. "Alex," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" It wasn't a question of concern. It was an accusation. "You are out of place. You are disrupting my world." Marcus Thorne's gaze swept over Alex, as dismissive as the receptionist, but backed by the weight of immense power. He didn't bother to hide his smirk. "Sarah, my dear, you didn't tell us you had a visitor." He let the word hang, turning it into something vaguely unpleasant, like an infestation. "This is my husband, Alex," Sarah said, the words coming out clipped. She didn't move to touch him, didn't bridge the gap of a few feet that felt like a chasm. "Alex, this is Marcus Thorne and Richard Sterling." Alex extended his hand. "A pleasure to meet you." Thorne ignored the hand, his eyes fixed on Alex's jacket. "An architect, isn't that right, Sarah? Do you design anything we might have heard of?" The question was a perfectly crafted insult, designed to diminish and dismiss. Before Alex could answer, Sarah jumped in, her voice strained. "Alex specializes in public works, libraries, community housing, very noble." She made the word noble sound like unprofitable. Alex felt a slow burn begin in his chest. He had spent the morning in a daze of euphoria, his mind reeling with possibilities. He had imagined this moment 100 different ways, but none of them had involved this cold, public humiliation. He looked at his wife, truly looked at her, and saw the frantic calculation in her eyes. She wasn't seeing her husband, she was seeing a liability, a social misstep she needed to manage. The envelope in his hands suddenly felt heavier, its contents more potent. The joy of the surprise was curdling into something else entirely, a test, and he had a sinking feeling that they were all about to fail it. "Well, we can't stand around in the lobby," Marcus said, his tone suggesting it was Alex's very presence that was lowering the property value. "Sarah, you were just about to present the quarterly projections. Your husband can wait in your office. I'm sure he'll find the view educational." He clapped a paternalistic hand on Sarah's shoulder, steering her toward the conference room. It was a clear, brutal display of ownership. Sarah shot Alex an apologetic, helpless look over her shoulder. It was a look he knew well. It was the look she gave him when her parents criticized his career choice at Christmas dinner. It was the look she gave him when her friends made jokes about his 10-year-old car. It was the look of a person who had chosen her side, and it wasn't his. "I'll just be a minute, Alex," she mouthed silently. He nodded, the calm on his face a stark contrast to the storm gathering inside him. He watched them walk away, the three of them a tight, exclusive unit. He was left alone in the vast, empty lobby, the receptionist now watching him with undisguised pity. He felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if he had stepped through a mirror into a world where all the familiar shapes were twisted and wrong. The manila envelope was a talisman, a secret key. He had come here to unlock a new future for him and his wife. He hadn't realized he would first have to unlock the truth of his marriage. A junior assistant, a young woman named Chloe with kind eyes and a nervous energy, was dispatched to lead him to Sarah's office. She seemed to be the only person in the building not radiating an aura of condescending superiority. "Right this way, Mr. Jennings," she said softly, as if apologizing for the entire corporate ecosystem. Sarah's office was exactly as he'd imagined, and yet it was still a shock. It was a glass box on the 42nd floor, with a panoramic view of the city skyline that was both breathtaking and terrifying. It was a conqueror's view. The furniture was minimalist and severe, a glass desk, a black leather chair, a single, perfect orchid on a chrome pedestal. There were no personal touches, no photos of them, of their dog, of the little house with the garden he so carefully tended. It wasn't an office, it was a statement of intent. It was a shrine to ambition, and there was no altar for a man who designed community centers. Alex walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city spread out below him, a complex tapestry of lives and structures. From up here, the buildings he designed, the places where people lived and learned and came together, were invisible, swallowed by the glittering behemoths of finance and power. He saw the world as Sarah and Marcus Thorne saw it, a hierarchy, a pyramid, and he was somewhere near the bottom. He sat in one of the two visitor chairs, sleek black things that were aesthetically pleasing but profoundly uncomfortable. He placed the envelope on the glass desk, its humble brown paper a stark contrast to the glossy, hard-edged perfection of the room. He could hear muffled voices from the conference room down the hall. He couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm of Sarah's presentation, confident, sharp, the voice of a woman completely in her element. It was a voice he rarely heard at home anymore. The door opened, and Chloe entered hesitantly, carrying a tray with a glass of water. "They said the meeting might be a while," she offered. "Can I get you anything else? Coffee?" "The water is fine, thank you, Chloe," Alex said, giving her a genuine smile. She seemed to relax slightly in his presence. "It's a beautiful view, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the window. "It is," Alex agreed. "It makes everything seem very small." Her eyes flickered toward the conference room. "Yes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It does." She lingered for a moment, as if wanting to say more, then seemed to think better of it, and scurried out, closing the door softly behind her. Alex was left alone with the silence, the view, and the envelope. He thought about the moment he had checked the numbers. He had been sitting at his drafting table, the plans for a new children's library spread out before him. He'd bought the ticket on a whim, stuffing it into his wallet and forgetting about it for days. When he finally checked, he had to look at it 5 times, his heart beginning a slow, powerful drumbeat against his ribs. The numbers shimmered on the screen, an impossible, magical sequence. $95 million. His first thought, his only thought, had been Sarah. He imagined her relief, the end of her 60-hour work weeks, the end of her constant, gnawing anxiety about status and appearances. He imagined them traveling, starting the small pro bono design firm they had talked about when they were young and idealistic, before the gravity of Thorne and Sterling had pulled her into its orbit. He had seen the money not as a ticket to a life of luxury, but as a ticket to freedom. Freedom for her, freedom for them. Now, sitting in her sterile office, he felt the crushing weight of his naivete. He had looked at the money and seen a bridge back to the woman he'd married. He hadn't considered that she might have already dismantled her side of it, stone by stone. The muffled sound of laughter came from the conference room, sharp and predatory. It was Marcus Thorne's laugh. Alex felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. This surprise was not going to end with tears of joy. It was going to end with a reckoning. He picked up the envelope, its smooth surface cool against his skin. The plan had changed. He wasn't here to give his wife a gift anymore. He was here to find out who she had become. An hour bled into 90 minutes. Alex sat perfectly still, a portrait of patience. He watched the sun arc across the sky, glinting off the distant river. He didn't check his phone. He didn't fidget. He simply waited, his mind a quiet, orderly space where he was laying new foundations, drawing up new blueprints. The initial shock and hurt had subsided, replaced by a crystalline clarity. He was an architect. He understood structure. And the structure of his marriage, which he had always believed to be built on solid ground, was revealing its fatal flaws. The foundation was compromised. The door finally opened. Sarah came in, followed by Marcus Thorne and Richard Sterling. Their mood was buoyant, celebratory. They were laughing about something, a shared joke that excluded him by its very nature. "Ah, the patient husband," Marcus boomed, his voice slick with condescension. He walked over to the window, placing his hands on the glass as if he owned the view itself. "Still here. I'm impressed. Most men would have gotten bored and wandered off to find a hardware store or something." Richard Sterling, a slighter, more weaselly man who orbited Marcus like a pilot fish, chuckled appreciatively. "Or a public library, perhaps." The insult was so specific, so clearly fed to him by Sarah, that it felt like a physical blow. Alex looked at his wife. She had the grace to look away, her cheeks coloring slightly. It was a small crack in her armor, but it was there. "Alex, we're just going to be a few more minutes," Sarah said, her voice losing some of its earlier brittleness. She was trying to smooth things over, to manage him. "We're finalizing the details for the Thorn Foundation's new headquarters. It's the biggest philanthropic project in the city's history." "Indeed," Marcus said, turning from the window. He gestured expansively. "A $200 million monument to corporate responsibility. We're currently vetting architects. We need a true visionary, someone with a global reputation. A Pritzker winner, ideally." He paused, then looked directly at Alex, a cruel little smile playing on his lips. "I suppose your name didn't come up." Alex met his gaze. The calm in his own eyes seemed to unnerve the other man slightly. "No," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. "I imagine it wouldn't have." "Of course not," Marcus said, recovering his bluster. "This is the big leagues. It requires a certain scale of ambition." He looked around the office, then his eyes landed on the manila envelope on the desk. He gestured toward it with his chin. "What's that? Plans for your next birdhouse?" Richard Sterling snickered. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Marcus, please." "What? I'm just curious," Marcus said, his eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. A man comes to his wife's high-powered office in the middle of the day, clutching a mysterious envelope. It's intriguing. Is it a heartfelt letter? A stack of coupons? Divorce papers? He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Alex didn't move. He didn't react. He let the man's words hang in the air, their ugliness exposed. He was a builder. He knew that the first step to dismantling a faulty structure was to expose its weaknesses. And Marcus Thorne's weakness was his arrogance. It was a gaping, foundational flaw. "It's just some papers from home," Sarah said quickly, moving to intercept Marcus's gaze, to deflect his attention. "It's nothing important." "Nothing important?" Alex spoke the words softly, but they cut through the tension in the room. He looked at Sarah, a long, steady look that held a decade of shared history and a universe of unspoken questions. "You think it's not important?" Sarah froze. The look in his eyes was one she hadn't seen before. It was not the look of the gentle, accommodating man she took for granted. It was the look of a stranger, someone with a quiet, unshakable core of strength she had never bothered to acknowledge. "Well," she stammered, "I just meant, it's not work-related." "Some of the most important things aren't work-related," Alex said, his voice still level. He picked up the envelope. He held it not like a trophy, but like a piece of evidence. "You were talking about your foundation, a $200 million project. You're looking for a visionary architect, and I assume significant private donors to help fund it." Marcus smirked, crossing his arms. "We're always open to 7- or 8-figure contributions." "Why? Do you know someone who wants to endow a water fountain in the lobby?" The room was silent. The air crackled. This was the moment, the culmination of 1,000 tiny compromises, 1,000 paper cuts to his dignity. Alex could feel the turning point, the fulcrum on which his entire life was about to pivot. He had come here to share a joy. Instead, he was going to deliver a judgment. "Something like that," Alex said. He laid the envelope back on the desk and slowly, deliberately opened the clasp. The sound was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. He slid out a single, folded piece of paper. It was the official prize claim confirmation from the State Lottery Commission. He unfolded it and placed it on the glass, smoothing it with his palm. Marcus, his curiosity piqued, leaned forward. Richard craned his neck. Sarah stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. "What is this?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with impatience. He squinted at the paper. His eyes widened. He looked again, his brain refusing to process the information. The numbers were stark, undeniable. Prize amount, $95 million. Claimant, Alexander Jennings. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dense, heavy thing, absorbing all the sound and air in the room. The confident, condescending smirks on the faces of Marcus Thorne and Richard Sterling evaporated, replaced by slack-jawed disbelief. The entire power dynamic of the room, of their lives, had been irrevocably shattered by a single piece of paper on a glass desk. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice a choked whisper. Is this a joke? Do I look like I'm joking, Marcus?" Alex's voice was ice. He had not raised it. He had not changed his posture. He simply sat there, the calm center of the hurricane he had just unleashed. Richard Sterling snatched the paper, his hands trembling slightly. He read it, then looked at Alex, then back at the paper. It looks real. It has the official state seal." Sarah hadn't moved. She was staring at Alex, her face pale with shock. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin looking like porcelain. Her mouth was slightly open. He could see her mind racing, replaying the last hour, the last few years. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every time she had chosen this world over him. He was no longer her quaint, unambitious husband. He was a force, a power center that had just emerged in the center of her universe, and she had placed herself on the wrong side of it. 95 million? She breathed, the words barely audible. Alex finally stood up. He felt taller. The room, which had seemed so imposing moments before, now felt small, a cage for the two men who were staring at him with a new, desperate kind of attention. He walked to the window, looking out at the same view Marcus had claimed as his own. But Alex saw it differently now. He didn't see a pyramid to be climbed. He saw a city full of people. He saw communities that needed help. He saw the raw material for the kind of work he had always wanted to do, but on a scale he had never dared to imagine. He turned back to face them. The hunter's gleam in Marcus Thorne's eyes had been replaced by the frantic, calculating look of a predator who has suddenly found himself prey. "So," Marcus began, his voice attempting a jovial, man-to-man tone that was laughably false. "Alex, my boy, 95 million. That's spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. Sarah, why didn't you tell us your husband was such a man of fortune?" He laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. He walked toward Alex, his hand outstretched, no longer ignoring him, but seeking him out. "We should celebrate. Let me get a bottle of my best scotch. We need to toast this incredible luck." Alex looked at the outstretched hand and made no move to take it. "An hour ago, you wouldn't shake my hand. An hour ago, I was a man who designed birdhouses and wandered into hardware stores. What changed, Marcus?" The question was a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through the bluster and exposing the raw, opportunistic nerve beneath. Marcus's smile faltered. His hand dropped to his side. "Now, Alex, don't be like that," he said, his voice wheedling. "It was just a bit of locker room talk. A little friendly ribbing. You know how it is." "No," Alex said, his voice dangerously quiet. I don't know how it is, but you can tell me. Tell me how it is that my ideas for community-centric design were quaint and noble. But now suddenly, I'm a man of fortune you want to have a drink with. Tell me how my wife's embarrassment was a source of amusement for you. Explain the joke to me, Marcus. I want to understand the punchline." Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling the other man's facade piece by piece. Marcus Thorne, a man who commanded boardrooms and terrified subordinates, was speechless. He looked to Sarah for help, for a lifeline, but she was lost in her own sea of regret. She finally found her voice, and it was fragile, broken. "Alex, I had no idea." "That's the point, Sarah," Alex said, turning his gaze to her. It was not a look of anger, but of profound, weary disappointment. "You had no idea. You didn't know about the money, but you knew me, or you were supposed to. You knew my work. You knew my character, and you stood there in silence while these men, while your boss, dismissed everything I am. You chose to be one of them." "No," she whispered, taking a step toward him. "Alex, that's not true. I was just, it's complicated. This place, the pressure to be ashamed of your own husband?" Alex finished the sentence for her. "The pressure to laugh along with a joke at my expense? The pressure to value a man based on the cost of his suit rather than the content of his character? It doesn't seem that complicated to me, Sarah. It seems very, very simple." He let the silence stretch, forcing her to exist in the uncomfortable truth of what he had said. Richard Sterling was trying to make himself as small as possible, wishing the floor would swallow him whole. Marcus, however, was regrouping. He was a survivor. His mind was already shifting from damage control to opportunity. "Listen, Alex," Marcus said, his voice taking on a tone of sincere, earnest partnership. "Let's not get caught up in semantics. A simple misunderstanding. What this changes, what this means, is opportunity. Think of it, the Thorne Foundation, your vision, your capital. We could be partners. You wouldn't just be the donor, you could be the architect, your name on the building, the Jennings wing. Imagine it." It was a masterful pivot, a desperate, shameless but brilliant attempt to reframe the situation. He was offering Alex everything he thought a man like him would want: legacy, recognition, a seat at the table he'd been excluded from. He was trying to buy the dignity he had just tried to steal. Alex almost laughed. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. An hour ago, his name wasn't fit to be on a list of potential architects. Now Marcus wanted to carve it into granite. "My vision?" Alex repeated slowly. "You mean my quaint vision? My noble ideas? I don't think my vision would fit in a building with your name on it, Marcus." He walked back to the desk and picked up the lottery confirmation. He folded it neatly and slipped it back into the envelope. He then looked at the three of them, a judge delivering a verdict. "You were looking for a visionary architect for your monument to corporate responsibility," Alex said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "And you were looking for donors. Well, I am both of those things. And my answer to both is no." He paused, letting the finality of the word settle. "I will not be your partner. I will not be your architect. And I will certainly not be your donor." He turned to his wife. Her eyes were filled with tears, a desperate plea for him to stop, to rewind the last hour, to go back to being the man she could comfortably manage and dismiss. "As for us, Sarah," he said, his voice softening with a sorrow that was deeper than anger, "we have to talk, but not here, not in this glass box. This isn't your office, it's your cage, and I'm not sure you even realize you're the one holding the key." With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind the wreckage of their arrogance. He walked past Chloe's desk. The young woman was staring at him with wide, astonished eyes. She had clearly heard everything. As he passed, she gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod of solidarity. It was a tiny gesture, but in that moment, it meant more to him than $95 million. He walked to the elevator, the doors hissing open to receive him. As he stepped inside and the doors closed, sealing him off from that toxic world, he felt a profound sense of release. He hadn't just claimed a lottery prize, he had claimed himself. The elevator ride down was a descent into a new reality. The polished steel walls reflected a man he barely recognized. The hurt was still there, a deep, resonant ache in his chest. But it was overlaid with a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. He had spent years tamping down his own frustrations, making himself smaller to fit into the spaces Sarah's ambition left for him. He had convinced himself that his quiet life of purpose was enough, and it was. But he had also allowed his own value to be defined by her world's metrics. No more. The money wasn't the source of his power, it was merely the catalyst that had forced him to access a strength he already possessed. When he stepped back into the grand, intimidating lobby, it no longer seemed intimidating. It seemed hollow, a stage set for a play he was no longer a part of. The receptionist at the marble desk watched him walk toward the exit, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning respect. The whispers must have already started their journey down from the 42nd floor. News like that travels at the speed of light in a place powered by gossip and hierarchy. Outside, the city air hit him, thick with the smell of traffic and street food. It felt real, tangible. He took a deep breath. He had driven there in his 10-year-old sedan, the one Richard Sterling had implicitly mocked. He looked at it now, parked across the street, its paint slightly faded, a small dent in the rear bumper from a runaway shopping cart. He had never felt more affection for it. It was a car that had carried lumber for community garden projects, blueprints for women's shelters, and boxes of books for the libraries he'd designed. It was a car with a history of purpose. He got in and just sat for a moment, the keys in his hand. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah. He ignored it. It buzzed again. A text message, then another. He didn't look. He needed space. He needed to think. He started the car and pulled out into traffic, driving with no particular destination in mind. He was an architect. He thought in terms of structure, of stress and support, of foundations and facades. The facade of his marriage had been stripped away, and he was now staring at the compromised foundation. Had it always been like this? Had he simply refused to see it? He replayed years of memories now viewed through this new, harsh lens. The subtle condescension from her parents, which she never challenged. Her constructive criticism of his career, which was always about its lack of financial prestige. Her growing obsession with the superficial trappings of success, the right clothes, the right restaurants, the right friends. He had seen these as individual cracks, hairline fractures that could be patched over. He had not realized they were signs of a fundamental structural failure. She was ashamed of him. It was a truth so brutal he had never allowed himself to formulate it so clearly before. She loved the security he provided, the unwavering moral compass that she herself had lost. But she was ashamed of the man he was in the world she wanted to inhabit. His phone buzzed again. It was Marcus Thorne. The audacity of the man was breathtaking. Alex rejected the call, then blocked the number. A moment later, a text from an unknown number came through. "Alex, this is Marcus. I know you're upset. I was out of line. Completely. Let's have dinner, my treat. Any restaurant in the city. I want to make this right and discuss how we can work together. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for both of us." Alex laughed out loud, a short, sharp, bitter sound. Marcus didn't want to make it right. He wanted to make a deal. He saw Alex not as a person he had wronged, but as a resource he had mismanaged. He was now applying a different strategy to acquire the asset. It was disgusting. Alex deleted the message without replying. He drove for hours to the glittering canyons of downtown, out into the quieter, leafier suburbs, and then to the coast. He parked by the ocean, the gray waves crashing against the shore in a steady, calming rhythm. He got out of the car and walked along the beach, the cold wind whipping at his jacket. He had come to the office to start a new life with his wife. He had left it, having to start a new life without her. Could they fix this? Could they rebuild? A structure with a failed foundation couldn't just be patched. It had to be torn down. The site had to be cleared. and you had to decide if it was worth building on that same piece of land again. Did he want to? Did she? He thought about her face in that last moment. The shock, the regret, the terror. Her tears had seemed genuine. But what was she crying for? Was she crying for the man she had betrayed? For the love she had compromised? Or was she crying for the $95 million she had just watched walk out the door? That was the question. And the fact that he had to ask it was, perhaps, the answer. He spent the night in a small, anonymous motel by the sea. He turned off his phone, severing the last link to the life he had left behind that morning. He lay in the dark, listening to the sound of the waves, and for the first time he allowed himself to think about the money. Not as a solution to Sarah's anxieties, but as a tool for himself. $95 million. After taxes, it would be a little over 50. It was still a staggering, reality-bending sum. He could build anything he wanted. He could start his own firm, a non-profit architectural practice dedicated to creating beautiful, functional, and dignified spaces for those who needed them most. He wouldn't need to compromise. He wouldn't need to beg for grants or scrape together funding. He could just build. The idea was so pure, so powerful, it felt like a light turning on in a dark room. This wasn't a consolation prize. This was his purpose, amplified. The next morning, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in years. He bought a cheap burner phone and a laptop. He called the lottery commission to arrange the formal claim process. He contacted a highly recommended financial advisor and a lawyer who specialized in philanthropy. He moved with a quiet, methodical purpose. He was drawing up new blueprints again, but this time they were for his own life. Days turned into a week. He rented a small, furnished apartment in a part of the city he'd always liked, but Sarah had deemed not prestigious enough. He set up a home office, bought a new drafting table, and began to sketch. Ideas that had been dormant for years came pouring out of him. A new type of homeless shelter designed around dignity and community, not just warehousing people. A state-of-the-art library for a low-income neighborhood. A series of small, beautiful public parks to reclaim derelict urban spaces. The work consumed him, energized him. He was building again. He knew he couldn't avoid Sarah forever. He finally turned on his old phone. It was a digital avalanche. Over 100 missed calls, hundreds of text messages, voicemails. They were from Sarah, her parents, her friends, and even a few from Marcus and Richard. Sarah's messages charted a course from panic to anger to pleading. "Alex, where are you? Call me. How could you just disappear? This is cruel. I've been a fool, Alex, a complete and utter fool. I'm so sorry. Please just talk to me. I love you. Don't throw us away over this." Marcus fired Richard. "He's trying to show you he's serious." "I quit my job, Alex. I walked out this morning. Thorne and Sterling, it's not worth it. You're what's important. Please just come home." Her last message gave him pause. She quit her job. It was a significant gesture, a sacrifice. But was it a genuine change of heart or a strategic move? A desperate bid to get back in the good graces of the man who now held all the cards? He found he couldn't trust her motives. The wound was too deep. The betrayal had been too fundamental. He had seen the real her, the one who prioritized status over his dignity. Quitting her job didn't erase that. It just removed the context. He finally agreed to meet her. He chose the location, a small, unassuming coffee shop near one of the community centers he had designed years ago. It was his territory, a place where his values were literally built into the walls around them. She was already there when he arrived. She looked tired, diminished. The sharp corporate armor was gone. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater. She looked more like the woman he had married than the stranger in the glass office. "Alex," she said, her voice thick with emotion as he sat down. "Thank you for coming." "Sarah," he said, his tone even. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just sad. I meant what I said, she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. I quit. I walked away from all of it. Marcus is a monster. I was blind. I got so caught up in that world I lost myself. I lost us. I am so, so sorry for what I did, for how I let them treat you, for how I treated you. Her apology seemed sincere. Her remorse felt real. A part of him, the part that still loved her, wanted to believe her. It wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, and say it was all okay. But the architect in him, the man who understood foundations, knew it wasn't that simple. Why did you quit, Sarah? He asked quietly. Did you quit because you realized that world was toxic and it was destroying your soul? Or did you quit because you thought it was what I wanted to hear? She flinched as if he'd slapped her. That's not fair. Isn't it? He countered. A week ago, that job, that title, that office, it was your entire identity. You defended it. You sacrificed for it. You sacrificed me for it. Now it's gone. What changed? The job didn't change. Marcus didn't change. I did. Or rather, my bank account did. It's not about the money, she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. Seeing you walk out of that office, it was like a bucket of ice water. I saw everything clearly. I saw what I had become, what I was willing to tolerate. It was disgusting. The money it just forced the issue. It was the catalyst, not the reason. He listened, weighing her words. He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But trust, once shattered, is the hardest thing to rebuild. It's like trying to glue together a pane of glass. No matter how skilled you are, the cracks will always be there. I need time, Sarah, he said finally. I need space to figure out what I want. And you need to figure out what you want, independent of me and independent of this money. You need to find out who you are without the corner office and without a multi-millionaire husband. Maybe that's the same person I fell in love with. Maybe it's not, but we can't know that now. He stood up to leave. I've moved out. I have a new apartment. I'll have a lawyer send over the details. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially, of course. You won't have to worry about anything. Her face crumpled. I don't want your money, Alex. I want my husband. The husband you were ashamed of? The words were quiet, but they landed with devastating force. I'm not that man anymore, Sarah. Not because of the money, but because I will never again allow my worth to be determined by someone else's gaze, especially not by yours. He left her there, crying in the coffee shop he had built. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a vast, aching emptiness. He had won $95 million, but he had lost his wife. Or maybe, he realized with a painful clarity, he had just lost the illusion of the wife he thought he had. The weeks that followed were a blur of productive solitude. Alex finalized the creation of the Jennings Foundation, a private, philanthropic organization with a simple, powerful mission: to design and build beautiful, sustainable, and dignified spaces for communities in need. He hired a small, dedicated staff, including Chloe, the young assistant from Thorne and Sterling. He had called her out of the blue, offering her the position of foundation coordinator. She had accepted on the spot, her voice filled with a gratitude that humbled him. I saw what you did, Mr. Jennings, she had told him on her first day. I've worked at places like that for years, and I've never seen anyone stand up to a man like Marcus Thorne. You didn't just expose his greed, you exposed his cowardice. You have no idea what that meant to people like me. Her words were a balm. He was beginning to understand that the events in Sarah's office had not just been a private drama. They were a morality play that had resonated with others. He had become an unlikely hero, a quiet man who had spoken truth to power. His first project was ambitious. He bought a derelict city block in one of the most neglected parts of the city. The area was a food desert, lacked green space, and had an underfunded community center that was literally crumbling. His plans, which he worked on day and night, were transformative. He designed a multi-use development that included a state-of-the-art library and learning center, affordable housing units with rooftop gardens, a grocery co-op, and a central plaza with fountains and public art. It was everything he had ever dreamed of doing, all in one place. He wasn't just building structures, he was building a community. He poured his energy, his focus, and his heart into the project. It was his therapy. When he was at his drafting table, the lines and angles coming together to form something whole and beautiful, the ache in his chest would subside. He was creating. He was healing. He and Sarah began the slow, painful process of legal separation. They communicated mostly through lawyers, but they spoke on the phone a few times. The conversations were stilted, full of things unsaid. She told him she was taking classes in landscape design, something she had loved in college before the lure of corporate law had pulled her away. She was living in their old house, which he had insisted she keep. She sounded different, quieter, more reflective. One day his lawyer called him. "Alex, I've just had a rather unusual call from Sarah's counsel. She's refusing to accept any form of spousal support or any portion of the lottery winnings. She wants to sign a post-nuptial agreement, waiving all claims to it. She wants nothing from you." Alex was stunned. For all his cynicism, he hadn't expected this. It was a move that ran completely counter to the calculating, status-obsessed woman he had seen in that office. Could he have been wrong about her? Was this proof that her change was real? He agreed to meet her again, this time at a neutral location, a park halfway between his new apartment and her old house. It was a crisp autumn day, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. She looked healthier, more rested. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet composure. "Why, Sarah?" he asked, getting straight to the point. "Why are you refusing the settlement? You're entitled to it." She looked at the ground, scuffing a pile of leaves with her shoe. "Because you were right," she said softly. "You said I needed to find out who I am without the corner office and without a multi-millionaire husband. And I can't do that if I'm living on your money. It would just be another cage, a different kind of cage." She finally met his eyes, and he saw a clarity there that had been missing for years. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Alex, about us, about me. I spent so long trying to prove myself, trying to win the approval of men like Marcus Thorne, that I forgot what was actually important. I chased a version of success that was hollow, and in the process I devalued the most successful thing I ever had. You, your kindness, your integrity, your talent. I took it all for granted because it didn't come with a fancy title or a big paycheck. I was a fool." She took a deep breath. "I don't deserve that money. I didn't earn it. And I don't want it to be the reason we find our way back to each other, if that's even possible. If we ever have a future, it has to be built on something real, not on gratitude or obligation. It has to be because I'm the woman you fell in love with again, and you're the man I was too blind to see." They stood in silence for a long time, the autumn leaves swirling around their feet. Her words were everything he had needed to hear. They were an acknowledgement of her failure, a genuine expression of remorse, and a commitment to change. The anger and hurt that he had carried for weeks finally began to dissolve, replaced by a fragile, tentative flicker of hope. "You're taking a landscape design course?" he asked, his voice gentle. A small smile touched her lips. "Yes, I'm terrible at it, but I love it. It's about creating something that grows, something alive." He nodded, understanding completely. "I'm building a park," he said, "in the middle of the city. It's the centerpiece of a new community project." "I saw it in the news," she said. "The Jennings Foundation. It's incredible, Alex. It's you. It's everything you've always talked about." "Maybe," he said, a corresponding smile forming on his own face. "When you're done with your course, maybe you could come take a look. The park design, I could use a second opinion." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reconciliation. But it was a beginning. It was the first survey of a cleared site, the first tentative sketch on a blank piece of paper. It was the possibility of a new foundation. Months later, the project, which the media had dubbed Jennings Plaza, was well underway. The groundbreaking ceremony was a major city event. Alex, who hated public speaking, gave a short, heartfelt speech about the power of community and the importance of creating spaces that honored human dignity. He didn't talk about money, he talked about purpose. He saw Sarah in the crowd. She stood near the back, not drawing attention to herself. She wasn't there as his wife, but as an anonymous member of the public, watching. Their eyes met across the distance, and she gave him a small, proud smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated support, with no agenda and no calculation behind it. It was the smile he had missed for years. After the ceremony, as the news crews were packing up, she approached him. She was holding a rolled-up piece of paper. I brought something," she said a little shyly. "You said you wanted a second opinion." She unrolled the paper. It was a detailed, beautifully rendered sketch of a garden for the plaza's central courtyard. It was intricate, thoughtful, and full of life. It incorporated native plants, sensory elements for children, and quiet, secluded benches for reflection. It wasn't just a design, it was a story. "It's beautiful, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. "I just thought, the space should feel like it's giving people a hug," she said. "Your buildings do that. The garden should too." He looked from the drawing to her face. He saw the woman he had married, the passionate, creative, idealistic person who had been buried under years of corporate armor. She was finding her way back. And he realized in that moment that he wanted to be there to meet her. The reversal of fortune hadn't been about the money after all. The money was just a tool, a magnifying glass that had revealed the hidden truths of his life. The real fortune was in rediscovering his own strength, his own purpose, and the hope that the person he loved most could rediscover hers as well. It was the chance to build something new, something better, something on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. And that was a prize worth more than $95 million. What do you think? Can a relationship truly be rebuilt after a betrayal of trust like that? Or are some foundations too broken to build on again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found value in this story, please consider liking and subscribing for more tales of life's unexpected turns. We all face our own glass offices and our own quiet reckonings, and it's in sharing these stories that we find our common ground.